Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the 12 cast. This is the second season, first episode. We're starting off a whole new season. We're super excited. Had a lot of conversations to get us to this place. And so now we're here. We have the podcast. We have the YouTube channel. We have these different media channels that we're going to try to push this content out to and get this conversation rolling. So more and more of you can be part of this community we're trying to build that's striving to prioritize 12 others, just like Jesus did. We want to see everyone and someone's 12. That's what this is about. And so we want to have conversations that encourage you, that equip you. And so this season, hopefully we'll have a few more voices, a few more topics that we get into and hear from people like you about how it's going out there trying to be everyday ordinary missionaries. So today we're going to start off with a topic that has come up throughout our journey of Just 12, throughout the different ways that we've experienced this. And so today I have two guests with me, Scott Knollenberg. You'll recognize that name if you've come across the book, Just 12, which Scott and I co-authored together. We had a lot of great conversations that led us to writing that together and now continuing to have conversations around how we implement that and the implications of doing this thing of prioritizing 12 other people like Jesus did, trying to love them. And so Scott he runs a nonprofit. He volunteers as a pastor at a church. And so he is what some might call bivocational, doing these two things and trying to make those work together. And it's great to see him still plugged into community, both as a pastor and helping this non-for-profit in his own community. And so we're excited to have Scott join this conversation. And then Chloe Knollenberg, same last name. They are related. Yes, they are related. And Chloe has been around what we call church for as long about anybody could. For somebody that's at her age, she's grown up in the church. I've known her for a long time. Scott's obviously known her for her whole life. And um, but what Chloe brings, she has that church experience. She has this experience of being a part of church ministry, helping lead different church ministries, being a leader for elementary and middle school students. And now she's at college studying to be a teacher. And she really gives Scott and I a perspective that helps challenge us to think about not just the ways we've always thought about it, but how to think about the future, the present and the future, and how this stuff lands, not just with people like Scott and I who've kind of been immersed in what maybe I'll call old ways of thinking, and we'll get to that in a second. But ways of interacting and thinking about what church is, because the conversation for Scott and Chloe and I over the past couple of weeks has been, boy, it seems like we keep having questions and conversations with people that have either been a part of church and now are trying to do this Just 12 thing and saying like, well, how do these things fit together? Or people have been a part of church and are kind of going, well, wait a second, are you saying we don't need church? We're not supposed to do church this way? We're doing church wrong? Or people who are doing Just 12 and have been disconnected from the church and are saying, do I need to keep going? And so there's all these questions about how does the church and discipleship, how do these things relate to each other? Does the church define discipleship? Does discipleship define the church? What is this relationship they have? And really, the reality is that conversation has gotten pretty tangled, has gotten pretty messy. Scott and I had this conversation years ago about him being off at a discipleship conference. The title was discipleship. I won't steal the story, but like hearing lots of different definitions. And so there's so many different definitions. What is discipleship? What are the marks of a disciple? What does it mean to be a disciple? What does it mean to be a disciple maker? All these kind of things. So we're going to discuss that today. We're going to have some conversation, banter a little bit, talk back and forth. Hopefully it's conversation you are familiar with in some way and connect with it in some way. So let's get started. I just talked really fast and said lots of things. So I'll say a few more things to get us kicked off. So let's talk a little bit about what, if you look back 5 years, 10 years, maybe 15, or Scott, maybe longer than that for you. When we look back, what were some of the definitions of discipleship that you used to have or that you had early on in following Jesus or a couple years back? What were some of those ideas about what discipleship was and what was supporting those ideas? Where were those ideas coming from? Either one of you, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think for me, it's definitely it's been a journey. If you were to ask me that question, 15 years ago, Um, how do you do the Great Commission? Um, I think I would have said, I would look at like outcome measures like church attendance or church planting.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then I think for me, as uh, as we all talk about a lot here, as America continues to decline spiritually, uh, I knew something was broken. Like, okay,
Mhm.
something's not something's not working. Like, we continue to be in this massive spiritual decline in this nation. Meanwhile, other nations are just killing it,
Mhm.
spreading Christianity like early church wildfire. So that was the point where I was like, something's not adding up. Something's not correlating. And then I kind of went through this kind of a few-year journey of, okay, what does that parachurch model look like with different type
Mhm.
of programming, different ways to meet people, and went through that for a while. Tried to do different events. Just how do you outreach? Kind of this whole smorgasbord of different ways to try to reach people, to how to make disciples. Just a whole smorgasbord. In fact, Jake, yeah, you mentioned this. We mentioned it in the book that I went to a discipleship conference probably a decade ago, and I literally heard probably 30, 40 different definitions. Like, everyone has a different definition of what discipleship is. Everyone agrees we have a problem in this nation spiritually, but nobody agrees on the solution, if that makes sense. And,
Mhm.
of course, as we went down this path and this journey, and now I'm kind of coming back to, well, how did Jesus do it? Probably should have asked that 20 years ago, but
Mhm.
of just like his method of prioritizing and unconditionally loving 12 others, just 12, just a handful of people, and he could have done anything, right? He could have been an amazing church planter, built a gigantic church, been a church network planter of some sorts. No, no, he just simply poured his life and unconditionally 12 others as his main kind of earthly human ministry, and
Yeah.
that's been my journey for the last
Yeah.
15-20 years to come to this point of, hmm maybe it's just a more of a simple
Mhm.
but sustainable method that other nations and other countries we can learn from and kind of get back to the simple ways that Jesus both modeled and mandated.
Yeah. So you said a couple things in there that I just want to clarify for a few people. You said Great Commission, and not everybody might know that Great Commission is it's Matthew chapter 28. So book of Matthew chapter 28. End of this narrative about Jesus. Jesus gives this last. We call it the mandate, right? It's the Jesus mandate. He gives these last words and says, "Go and make disciples of all nations." And that phrasing and those verses are contested by a lot of people. It means this. It means that.
Yeah,
It means this. And that's what you're talking about. That journey that you've been on um, has really, uh, and we've been on a similar journey, Scott, where we're saying, hey, wait a second. It seems like and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, or this is just an idea I was really wrestling with today. How to express this? It's like what happened over the years was that there was early success. I was thinking about the parable that Jesus gives
mm,
of the sower of the seed, right? The sower goes out and he throws seed everywhere. It lands on the path. It lands in some dirt over here. It lands in some not so good dirt. It lands on some really good dirt. The really good dirt multiplies, 10, 30, 100 times fold. And I was thinking about that, how for us, I think there's a part of those who have been a part of a church that when we cast a lot of seed out and we see early growth, we see early success, we see the sprouting of things happening. It's almost like when we see that early growth, we're like, look, it's successful.
mm,
It's really good.
mm,
Look how much we're going to have. And then we start saying, well, that's how you do it. This is where it's all at. And so that early success, I
mm,
think, has led us to say, well, let's reproduce that. Let's make that into a system. Let's make that into a program or an event or whatever it might be, because we see this success that's early, or even maybe late success that's like right before the harvest. Like, look how much things have grown, but
Mm,
there's no fruit yet, right? There's no harvest yet. We don't actually see it yet. And it's like we celebrate those early wins that should maybe be celebrated, but not to this degree. And I think this is a human condition. I want to say this is a human condition where we see early success before the true outcomes that we maybe were meant to measure, that maybe we're going to take a lot longer. And I heard you talk about this, like the slower, the simpler. Um, and we say, okay, let's do it. Like, look, we're doing it right. And it's like, well, no, we're not even at the harvest yet. So anyway, I'm just
yeah.
going to throw that out there because I was contemplating that today and just was really like, what causes this? So um, just to throw that into the mix of our conversation. Chloe, how about for you? Like, what was some of your experience with how you understood discipleship and what it was supposed to look like, or how you thought it was? Where was that coming from for you?
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned like 5 to 10 years ago. So I mean, like, I'm young, I'm 19. So I mean, for 10 years ago, for me, that was like back in the elementary age. So I think at that time, like growing up in the church, we never really, I don't think I ever got a clear cut definition on what discipleship actually was. I think too, and to some extent, I can understand that because talking about that conceptual idea can be very confusing and maybe even a little bit abstract to kids. So we
Uh-huh.
needed to put it in terms that were very plain and simple to understand for kids. So that meant bring friends to church. That was always the
Uh-huh.
thing that was encouraged. There was so much heavy emphasis on programming, and even as I got into like into middle school and everything, like getting plugged into youth groups and other youth programs, the retreats, mission trips, all that kind of stuff. Like it was very heavily focused on programming. And kind of what we're seeing now is that I think back, and I say back in the day, I really mean like, not even that many
Tuesday.
years ago, but it was rather easy to get people to church because I think when we saw that it was just kind of the common narrative in America, like, hey, you
Mm.
go to church on Sunday. It was very easy to bring friends to church or be like, hey, you should come check out like my small group or my Sunday school class or whatever that might be. It was a very easy sell. Well, now we're kind of in an era where, the people my age, like we're sort of seeing like this deconstructionist movement where
Mm.
people are um, so turned off by church for a variety of reasons, and that goes not just for maybe some of more like the traditional denominations, but now I'm even seeing it for like more contemporary non-denominational churches, where it does seem like people are getting a little fed up with how production like it is, so we are seeing a lot of frustrations for a variety of reasons, which has made the whole, it's been kind of ingrained in us since youth, like, hey, invite friends to church. And we're just seeing that that is not working anymore. I've seen a ton of my friends who are, they're still in high school and like they try to invite people, they try to get people plugged in, and it's just not working.
Mm.
So that kind of made me wonder, well, so really what is discipleship then if it's not just inviting people to these events, getting them plugged into programming? And again, nothing wrong with it at its core, but I think it's really like kind of you talked about, Dad, like it's all about intention. Are we just trying to manufacture numbers? Are we just trying to see these results? Or are we actually wanting to get people plugged into these for allowing them to grow closer in their relationship with God, or to find Jesus maybe even for the very first time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's there was a time, I think, and if I go back 10, 15, 20 years, I did ministry for, I started in student ministry uh, right out of college. And so 20 years of ministry of seeing like, hey, when you invite to church, we're trying to create environments, whether it's programmings or events, we're trying to create environments where people can move into a relationship with Jesus and be discipled.
Mm.
And in many ways, there was a lot being cultivated in those spaces, in those environments. Um, and then but there were times when the cultivation stopped, when there wasn't everyone participating in that discipleship process. It really became really the professionals, the credentialed, me, being the discipler of 100 people or 200 people or 30 people or whatever it was. And like participation of everybody in the process seemed to start dropping off. And I think when that started to happen, when I was doing student ministry, working with you, Scott, like there was this space where it was like really starting to question that, like, wait a second, are disciples, are people being discipled? Are they becoming disciples? Are they being disciple made? Like, is that happening? And it kept feeling like, maybe not, but let's keep doing this thing because this is what's always kind of happened. This is what we need to do. And it was how we were measuring our success. It was how we were measuring our effectiveness, maybe is the way I want to say it. Not success necessarily, but like, hey, these were environments that we're working, and so let's keep getting people to them. Here's the marks of a disciple. That was the other thing I think I started to question is like, I started seeing like there was, let's call them 3 or 5 different things that, hey, this is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And if you're doing these things, you're a disciple. And I was like, wait a second, I know people doing those things. I don't know if they're following Jesus. Like I think like it kind of hit those marks, and I was like, but I don't know that they love Jesus. I mean, they're kind of interested in him. I don't know that they're
Mm,
trying to be obedient to Jesus. I
mm,
don't know that they would even call themselves a Christ follower. Maybe they will, but like they're doing these things. And so that kind of wrestled with me like, man, maybe, and it's like you said, Scott, it was this journey of going, well, what did Jesus really say? What did Jesus really do? Um, how did he define his disciples, and what did he tell his disciples to do to start defining discipleship? And so, and those things go together. Church and discipleship obviously go together. The church is made of disciples. You can't, and when a church is happening, then hopefully there's some discipleship happening. Like those things got to happen. So, um, so it sounds like there's this common thread, a little bit of a common thread of being attached to things that may have had the right motive at the time and had this desire and maybe even had some good outcomes, but it's like we're still attached to those processes and systems even though the results aren't there to back it up anymore. And that's, Scott, what you experienced. It sounds like everybody's kind of going, all right, but if we do this or if we do this. And so the parachurch was the other word you used, Scott, parachurch ministries. It's almost like there was reactions to the deficiencies, right? If there was a
yeah.
deficiency in the church, well, there's a deficiency in justice ministries. We need to do more restorative things. Oh, there's a
Mhm.
evangelistic, deficiency. We have to do more evangelism. And so it's like these things popped up. It was almost like culture telling the church, hey, there's deficiencies, right? And now the big one is, hey, just it seems to be a discipleship deficiency across the board. And maybe we ran too hard after one of those definitions. We run hard after that specific deficiency, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we forgot about everything else. So uh,
Yeah.
as we, do you have some more thoughts there, Scott, to add?
Yeah, I just it definitely, like you said, definitely has been a journey all over the map. I totally forgot there was the kind of that missional expression of church too. Like, what
Mm,
does it look like? Again, everyone understands there's a problem in this country, and we're all kind of like going in different directions of what the solution is. And you gave some more examples there, so that was good, Jake. And that's why I think we just need to call a timeout in this country and just say,
mm,
how did Jesus do it? He was, and it was tougher. He was in a dark and divided nation. Sound familiar?
mm.
His model worked anywhere, under any conditions. And I think it's time to take a timeout. What are we doing? And then is it aligned with how Jesus did it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when you say that, Scott, I think most people who are in ministry realm, church realm,
Yeah.
uh, would probably say, well, no, we aren't. That's what we're doing. We're doing discipleship. Like we're getting back to the way Jesus did it. And they would probably find, it's a little bit of a catch-22 for us where it's like, we're kind of saying the same thing that everybody else is saying. Like, well, we're just getting back to Jesus. Look what Jesus did. And so obviously we're in danger of doing the same thing where it's like, hey, we're
Mhm.
focused on the outcomes that we believe is what Jesus did. And so that's how we're defining discipleship. And so we do kind of have to have this accountability of like, is this how Jesus said to do it? Is this how he modeled it? Is this so not just what he said, but also what he modeled? And I think that's the piece that maybe early on was missing for me. It's like Jesus said a lot of things about like being a good person, a moral person, somebody who's righteous and somebody who's living in this resurrected life and power. But the stuff he said about discipleship, that's not relevant anymore because we live in a different culture, right? Like,
Mhm.
or we'll say, well, he kind of said this about discipleship, so let's do that. But we like haven't paid attention to the model that he had, which was really simple. which was really relationally, narrowly focused. What else would you say about it now? I mean, I think we're all on this 12 cast together because we all believe, hey, it's this 12 thing. Let's invest here. Let's invest this way. Let's prioritize this way. So what's driving that? What are some of the things driving that for you when you say, yeah, we're just trying to get back to this more simple model that Jesus had for us and mandated for us? What are some things driving that? What are some experiences, verses, narratives about Jesus? What's driving that for you too?
Well, I go back to kind of the sentiment that discipleship should really be able to be done anytime, anywhere, regardless of context. That's really kind of what has defined that for me in recent years, because I kind of went through this a bit in college where I had numerous leadership positions in our church. I was, that was the main ministry. And I love it, and I still do, of course. But I kind of found when I came to college, completely different state. Didn't know anybody from my hometown going into my college. Had zero connections to the area that I'm in now. I'm like, wow, all the stuff that I was doing that I thought was, impacting others, trying to lead others to Christ, like I can't do that here. So in that case, I was, because I think for a long time I treated, even though, Just 12 had been out for a while, I still kind of treated that as like a supplement to what I had already been doing. Because what I felt like that I was, me and my friends were doing through the church, it just felt bigger. It felt more like that production or that typical church ministry that we were all used to. Like that felt more impactful to teach to 100 kids at vacation Bible school than it did just to invest in 12 people. So it kind of felt like just this add-on. But when I came to college and all of a sudden, like, I didn't have the, for lack of better words, like the platform of the church, it kind of made me realize, wow, Just 12 is the only thing that I can do anywhere at any time. And I think that's even, speaks to the idea of like, what really qualifies someone to do Just 12, because you talked about, Jake, too. I love how you said, like, kind of the goal of bringing people to church. Oh, let's bring them to the professionals. Let's bring them to the pastors to help kind of create this spiritual growth, when really it kind of undermines like what we can do as everyday ordinary Christians. So I think coming to college was definitely just an experience that really helped me just simplify and scale back. Like this was still something that I could do. And, it's even worth mentioning that, I'm in a completely different state, and, pretty much everyone in my 12 is still, back home, and the strategy still works. Like it still upholds even in different locations when I'm not at my church, when I'm not in my hometown or, my high school or anything like that. So I think that was the biggest shift for me, where Just 12 sort of became sort of the foundation or the base of what I was doing. And then church kind of became like an add-on or a supplement to that. So just a little bit of like reframing my mindset in terms of how that worked.
That's good. You bring up something that I mean, I think it just didn't even cross my mind when I was thinking about the way Jesus did it, the way Jesus talked about it. Like, yeah, he didn't wait to get to the temple. He didn't wait to get to the synagogue. He didn't have to do, I mean, he's doing discipleship on the road, in the street, down, in the upper room, all, over here, over there. Like, there's nowhere that he's not doing discipleship. And it's like, that is such a profound and simple idea. Yet, like, we miss it, right? Because we do see well, he talked to big crowds, but it's like, yeah, but discipleship, I don't think I don't want to be wrong about this, but I don't think Jesus preaching to the crowds is never called discipleship. He doesn't call the crowds disciples. There's a portion of them that he takes aside, or he pulls aside, or he interacts with, and that are called the disciples, whether it's 500 or 72 or 12 or 3. I don't think it's ever referred to that he's doing any sort of discipleship with the crowds. He's preaching the kingdom. He's inviting them into that relationship. But it's the relationship that's called discipleship, because discipleship is a relational word. So preaching to 100 people it can be empathetic, it can be compassionate, it can be a lot of things. I don't know that it could be relational. It could be personal, but I don't know that it has a relational connection out in that relationally focused, narrow focused way that we see Jesus experiencing, especially with his 12. So that's just a really great. I love that you said that, Chloe. It's really good.
I think we kind of sometimes we overlook Jesus's primary earthly human ministry, you know. And now, of course, I'm not talking about the death and resurrection as the Messiah. I'm talking about his 3-year earthly ministry. So oftentimes we preach on and talk about these incredible miracles he did. You know, about 39 miracles in the Gospels. We talk about that as his, primary. Or we talking about, Jake, him preaching the Sermon on the Mount, that kind of stuff. Or, but what gets overlooked is the majority of his time was prioritizing just his 12 disciples. That was his primary ministry. And I think that gets overlooked, whether it's in movies or how we preach it, or that gets overlooked. So when people talk about Jesus' human ministry, the miracles he did, all the preaching he did, he was randomly blessing random people. He did. But the majority of his time was just simply unconditionally loving 12 people. I think that gets overlooked so much.
It's so written into the story and the narrative that it's overlooked. Like, it's such a tangible, on every page, here it is, that it's like we miss it because it's everywhere. Which is like a weird paradox almost. So I'm hearing.
And then it even leaves us with the question, like, well, what do we do about that end? Because obviously, same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, like, lives in us and everything. Like, know, there are these capabilities here, but it's not what we're seeing the majority of the time. So it kind of can sometimes leave us discouraged. Like, so Jesus did all this, and that's awesome, but can I do that? Like, what's a practical thing that I can do on an everyday basis? And we struggle a bit to even articulate that, like, because we always say, like, we want to live our lives like Jesus did, and we typically confine that a lot to just the fruits of the Spirit, which, of course, like, is a major part, like, exemplifying those fruits of the Spirit. But how do you do that? And, like, we kind of have to go back to that, and it was through those relationships that we're able to exemplify that. So it all goes back to that relational focus that you were talking about.
I mean, I have this theory that the more that we engage in this simple command, this mandate, the more we experience the power and authority of Jesus in our lives. Not saying that there isn't other ways to experience that, whether it's miracles or deliverance from evil things happening in our lives, all those things can happen. But when we have it happening in a tangible, interactive, relational way, where it's like you said, like, I don't need to wait for the miracle to happen. I can invest in this person right now and be like Jesus and do what Jesus is calling to me to. And then as I'm doing that, I see more opportunities for God to be at work in their life. I see more opportunities for God to be at work in my life. I mean, the amount of times that I've had, what I would say, the Spirit speak to me, not this, not an audible voice, but in a conversation with somebody at my 12, where I get a sense of, like, say this, tell that story, ask this question, whatever it might be, and I do, and then I see God do something, and I'm like, well, that wasn't me. That was God at work through me, with me. I get to partner with him in that. And it's like all that kind of feels condensed in what we call this Great Commission, this Jesus mandate. It's like he says, I've got authority. It's yours. Invest in people like I did. And because we don't invest, we kind of miss out on a little bit of that, like, tangible authority and power that Jesus is saying, it's right here. I gave it to you. So I kind of think, like, it's not a shame thing. I don't want to shame people into saying, like, because you're not doing just 12, because you're not doing the relational ministry thing, you're not experiencing God's power. Not saying that, but I do think the more we engage in it, the more we will experience his power. So, so I hear relational. I hear anytime, any place. We've talked about the journey a little bit, like that we're all on this journey. It seems like Jesus' way of doing it is this, I don't want to say non-linear, but it's personalized, and I don't want to make it about a person. It's not just personal, like, this is just about me and Jesus. No, but there's a personalized aspect of a discipleship. There's no linear path or system that Jesus, he didn't say, now do this step, this step, this step, this step. It's like everybody's kind of in a different path. And then I would say the one that I'm afraid to say a little bit, because I feel like it's been overemphasized right now, is there is a reproducing component to what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, because it's written right there in this mandate, right? Like, go and make disciples. baptize, teach, and obey everything. And it's like, well, everything means this thing too. And so how do you do that? That's not on the grandiose scale. You do it with this just 12. I'm sure there's more. We could exhaust this topic probably for the rest of this season 1, or excuse me, season 2 of the 12 cast, and we probably will continue to loop back to it. Before we close out for today's conversation, any closing thoughts, final thoughts that we want to talk about before we go?
I would say a couple things real quick. I'm certainly a huge fan of Jesus' bride, the church, and I feel like as a pastor, my job is to encourage and equip everyone to start their journey to 12. That's the purpose of the gathering, to equip and encourage people to go scatter, to find their 12. So this is not like I'm not in this anti-church state of
it's a good thing to say. Yep.
Forget Jesus' bride. The church is the church, and the church needs to equip and encourage average, ordinary people to be disciple makers, not just see how many people we can get into the seats.
Yeah. How do we re-engage the systems and the programs?
Yes.
To be about creating those opportunities for a discipleship model after Jesus.
And we need church to start making that shift, making that back to making this. That's what they're doing in the other nations. And then one additional thought, I think, for me, like what is personal, individual, I don't want to use the word, well, I'll use the word success is for me, in the reproducing language that you use is my 12. Does my 12 have their 12? For me, that's the goal, not nickels and noses and all those outcomes. For me personally, is my 12 have my 12. I would go a step further, and maybe I'm a little too brash on this one, but if you can't name your 12 or 10 or whatever, 8, if you can't name, step 1 that Jesus did was he named his 12. If you can't name your 12, then you're not making disciples. And that's a little harsh. It's a little harsh.
It's harsh, but I mean, Scott, you're hitting a little bit of even some of the latter part of my journey, where if somebody were to ask me, who are you discipling? I mean, they didn't use the language of who is your 12 because we didn't have that language yet. But like, who's somebody you can point to that's discipling? And on a very specific way, there wasn't anybody I kind of pour into this person once in a while. Well, this person's in my small group. Well, this person, but I wasn't really doing a discipleship. I was doing disciple-like things with them once in a while. And so I don't know that it's too brash. I think you're hitting on something there. Any thoughts from you, Chloe, before we go?
Yeah, kind of when we were talking about just what we saw about church 5 to 10 years ago and stuff, and I was kind of just thinking back on childhood. Like I go back to I think about the first verse I ever recall hearing from the Bible, like Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Like it could be so tough to go with what we know, to go, and it is in a way, for people who've grown up in church, there again, like you said, Dad, there's nothing inherently wrong. Like we should make church a priority, absolutely. But if we continue to lean on the methods that, you're right, maybe we're successful for a short amount of time, or our understanding of how those events worked, then I think we're missing a greater opportunity for everyday ordinary people to be able to minister to others through this very simple relational thing. And that's even such an encouragement too for younger people, because there are a lot of younger people that, hey, you may not be plugged into a church, you may have a relationship with God, but I know so many people who say, oh yeah, of course I'm a follower of Christ, but I'm not plugged into a church. I just don't like that. I don't like that setting or anything. So it kind of leaves us at this place where a lot of young people even feel stuck. So what am I supposed to do about it then? It's just my relationship with God is just, a personal thing. It's not supposed to be shared with anybody else, but I really think that this Just 12 model has implications for any age group, regardless if you came from a church background, if you didn't come from a church background, regardless of when you accepted Christ, all these different factors, like this is something tangible and doable, and it may not necessarily produce the, we can't measure, our success, like you said, like by number of baptisms or, attendance or anything like that. Like it's literally attendance 12, right? But, just like being in it with people for the long haul, because obviously we only saw a snapshot of Jesus's ministry, like this 3-year earthly ministry, but majority of the time he was prioritizing these people. Good. So it is a lengthy process, and we may not be able to see the results that we're used to seeing with some of our typical church methods, but yeah, just keep going, because God's gonna use that.
Good. As you were talking, I had this thought of like, my 12 should be taking attendance of me in their life, right? Like how often am I, and not in like a weird, like, oh, Jake wasn't here this week, but like, yeah, how much am I present in their life? That's the goal, is to be present in their life, not for them to come to something for me, right? Or that I'm about. And out of that, more relationships grow, more people want to be together, and the more people want to be together, the more they go to church together. They go to these things that we call church together. So lots of good discussion there. More things to contemplate for me, even as we continue to go down this path. I know for me, this journey, it does. The more I engage with it, the more desperate I am. I don't know if that's the word, to be around people who are trying to live on a similar mission, which I would say is the church. This desire to gather together to say, let's get equipped, let's get encouraged, let's sing songs, let's pray together, let's share the struggles. And so we can do that a little bit through these digital things that we have. But there is a part of it saying like, man, when I get a chance to do that with somebody shoulder to shoulder, across the table, eating together, whatever it is, it changes the dynamic. So of course we need to be together. Don't stop gathering. That's what Paul encouraged people to do. So thanks for the input. Thanks for the conversation. Hopefully for those of you who have been listening along, watching along, if you have questions, you have ideas, thoughts, reach out to us. We'll keep some links available for the book, for ways to get in contact with us. And we'd love for you to share your journey, not just with us, but share it with others too. So let's keep striving to loving our 12 like Jesus did, but also working to see everybody in someone's 12. Thanks a lot, Scott. Thanks a lot, Chloe. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the 12 Cast. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment down below. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at the 12 Cast Official so you're up to date on all things Just 12. We'll see you next time.